The key scrapes in the lock, and it's a sound I've heard 1,000 times, the sound of Liam coming home. But tonight it sounds different. It sounds final. My hand is actually shaking as I turn the knob, and the first thing that hits me isn't the sight of the room, but the smell. It's not dust, not mildew you'd expect from a sealed-up space. It's sweet, cloying, like overripe flowers left in a vase for far too long, the water gone murky and thick. It's the kind of smell that gets in the back of your throat and makes you want to gag, but you can't look away. I'd like to tell you I was some kind of hero, that I'd had suspicions for weeks and I was bravely uncovering the truth, but that would be a lie. I was just a woman in love, or at least I was a woman who thought she was in love. And love, real love, the kind that consumes you, it doesn't make you brave. It makes you blind. It makes you stupid. It makes you ignore the little splinters of wrongness that keep poking at you until one day you realize you're not bleeding from one little cut, but from 1,000. His name was Liam, and he was, for all intents and purposes, perfect. We met at a ridiculously pretentious coffee shop, the kind where the barista judges you for ordering a caramel macchiato. I was fumbling with my wallet, my hands full of books, and my cup started to topple. He caught it. One-handed, he just reached out, steady as a rock, and saved me from a lapful of hot coffee and humiliation. He smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. He had these eyes, the clearest, kindest blue I'd ever seen. He said, "That would have been a tragedy. That's a $5 cup of coffee." That was it. That was the hook. We talked for an hour. He was an architect, he said. He designed homes, but his real passion was restoring old ones, bringing them back to life. He talked about the soul of a house, the stories held in the floorboards, the memories trapped in the plaster. It sounded romantic. It sounded profound. It should have been my first clue. Normal people don't talk about houses having souls. They talk about open floor plans and good resale value. 6 months later, we were living together. He found us the perfect place, an old Victorian on the edge of town, set back from the road by a tangle of overgrown rhododendrons. It was a fixer-upper, which he was ecstatic about. For me, it was just ours, our first home. I remember the first time he carried me over the threshold. He stumbled just for a second, right there on the doorstep. He caught himself, laughed it off, said the wood was rotted. But for that split second, his face went pale. He looked down at the worn stone step, not with the eye of an architect assessing damage, but with something else, something that looked an awful lot like fear. That was the first splinter. But I was unpacking boxes, dreaming about where we'd put the Christmas tree, and I didn't even feel it go in. The house was a project for sure. We spent our weekends scraping wallpaper and sanding floors. Liam was in his element. He'd spend hours in certain rooms, just standing there, listening. I'd ask him what he was doing, and he'd just shake his head, a distant look in his eyes, and say, "Just getting to know the place." I thought it was charming, quirky, my architect boyfriend communing with his house. And then there was the door. It was at the end of the hallway upstairs, tucked away in an alcove you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. It wasn't like the other doors in the house. It was shorter, narrower, and made of a dark, almost black wood. It had no handle, just a small, old-fashioned keyhole, tarnished with age. The first time I noticed it, I tried to push it open. Nothing. I jiggled the antique knob we'd put on the linen closet. Nothing. It was solid, immovable, like a wall. "What's in there?" I asked Liam that night over dinner. He didn't look up from his plate. "Just an old storage space, probably just the gap between the walls. Old houses have them. Dead space." "Can we open it? I'm curious." He finally looked at me, and that kind blue gaze was suddenly unreadable. "It's not worth it. The frame is probably load-bearing. Opening it could compromise the whole structure of the hallway." I'm an English teacher, not an architect. It sounded plausible. It sounded responsible. I shrugged it off. That was number 2, and number 3, and number 4. Every time I'd pass that door, I'd feel a chill. Not a draft, but a cold that seemed to come from inside my own chest. I'd find myself standing in front of it, just staring at the black wood, my hand almost reaching out to touch it. Once I pressed my ear against it. I don't know what I expected to hear. Mice, maybe, pipes, but there was nothing. Just a silence so complete it felt like a sound in itself, a low, humming absence of noise that made my ears pop. Liam started working late, a lot. He'd come home smelling not of sawdust and paint, but of that same sweet floral rot I'd later find in the room. I'd hug him, bury my face in his shirt, and for a second I'd get dizzy. I told myself it was just his new cologne, a stupid, expensive cologne he'd started wearing. Then the dreams started. Every night, the same thing. I'm walking down the hallway. It's dark, but I can see the faint outline of the black door. It's open, just a crack, a sliver of deeper blackness against the black wood. And from inside the room, I hear a whisper. It's not a voice, not really. It's more like the memory of a voice, a soft, sibilant sound that slithers into my ear and wraps around my brain, and it's calling my name, Sarah. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. Liam would be fast asleep next to me, his breathing deep and even, a faint smile on his perfect face. The smile would terrify me more than the dream. The final splinter was the photograph. I was looking for a box of Christmas ornaments in the attic. We'd never really cleared it out, just shoved our stuff next to the previous owners. I found an old shoebox tucked under the eaves. Inside were yellowed photographs, the kind with the crimped white edges. They were all of the same woman. She was beautiful in a haunting way. Dark hair, pale skin, and eyes that seemed black in the faded photos. In every single one, she was in this house, standing in the kitchen, sitting on the front steps, looking out the living room window. In the last photo, she was standing at the end of the hallway upstairs, right in front of the black door. It was open behind her. I couldn't see inside, just darkness, and on her face was an expression I'll never forget. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't fear. It was a look of absolute, soul-deep longing, like she was looking at the one thing she wanted most in the world, and it was just out reach. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was a date from 20 years ago, and one word, Eleanor. I took the photo downstairs and showed Liam. He was in the kitchen, making dinner. He took the photo, glanced at it, and his entire face changed, just for a fraction of a second. The mask slipped, and underneath that kind, handsome face was something cold, something ancient. He handed it back to me, his smile firmly back in place. "Just the old owner, I guess," he said, his voice light. "Eleanor, pretty name. Put it back, honey. It's not ours to keep." That night, I waited until he was asleep. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the house settle. But it wasn't settling. It was breathing. and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I wasn't the only one awake. Liam's side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold. I got up. I didn't make a sound. I crept to the bedroom door and peered into the hallway. A sliver of light was coming from the direction of the black door. It wasn't electric light. It was a flickering amber glow, like candlelight. I moved on silent feet, pressing myself against the wall. When I got to the corner, I held my breath and looked. He was there. Liam, standing in front of the open door, the black door that wasn't supposed to open. He had his back to me, his body silhouetted by the soft, warm light spilling from the room. He was perfectly still, just staring inside, and he was whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone, it was the same from my dreams, soft, intimate, a lover's whisper. He stood there for what felt like an hour. Then, slowly, he reached out a hand, not to touch the doorframe, but to someone or something just inside. He smiled. It wasn't his smile for me. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. It was the smile of a man seeing his beloved after a long, long time. Then, as quietly as he had appeared, he stepped back and pulled the door closed. The black wood swallowed the light, plunging the hallway back into darkness. He walked right past me, his bare feet silent on the floor, his eyes open but unseeing. He got back into bed. A minute later, he was breathing deeply, peacefully, that faint smile on his lips. I stood there in the hallway, shaking for the rest of the night. I watched the black door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for whatever was inside to come out. But it remained closed, silent, patient. The next morning, he was Liam again, making coffee, humming a tune, asking me if I wanted eggs. He kissed my forehead. "You look tired. Bad dreams?" I couldn't eat. I couldn't speak. I just watched him, the way he moved through the house, a place I now realized was not our home. It was his home, and I was just a guest, an interloper. He left for work with another kiss, another smile. The second the door clicked shut, I was on my feet. I went to the bedroom first. I tore through his things, his desk, his closet. I don't know what I was looking for. More photos, a diary? I found nothing, just clothes, blueprints, books on architecture. He was meticulous. He left no trace. Then I went to the hallway. I stood in front of the black door in the cold light of day. It was just a door again, solid, unyielding, no handle. I ran my hands over the frame, looking for a catch, a hidden button, anything. Nothing. I pushed, I shoved, I threw my shoulder against it until it hurt. It was like trying to move a mountain. I was about to give up, to slump against the wall and cry, when I remembered. Liam, the night before, he hadn't used a key. He hadn't touched the door at all. He had just stood there, and it had opened for him. It responded to him, to his presence. Desperation made me stupid, or maybe it made me brave. I closed my eyes. I put every other thought out of my head. I thought of Liam, his hands, his smile, his eyes. I let the love I had for him, the real, powerful, stupid love, fill me up. I pictured him standing here. I whispered his name, Liam, and I heard it, a soft click from deep within the wall. My eyes flew open. The door was open, just a crack, that same sliver of blackness from my dream. And that smell, that sweet, horrible smell, washed over me.
My hand trembled as I reached out. I didn't push the door. It swung open on its own, silent and smooth, as if it had been waiting for me my whole life. I stepped inside. It wasn't a closet. It wasn't a storage space. It was a room, a small room with walls that weren't wood or plaster. They were covered in something dark, something that glistened faintly in the light. There was no window, but the room was illuminated by a soft golden glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the light from my dream, the light from Liam's face. The walls weren't the only thing covered. The floor was strewn with them. Petals, thousands upon thousands of flower petals, brown and withered, their sweet rot the source of the smell. And in the center of the room, on a small ornate pedestal, was the source of the light. It was a vase, a simple, clear glass vase, and in it was a single flower, a flower I had never seen before. Its petals were the color of a fresh bruise, a deep, painful purple, and they seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, like a slow, steady heartbeat. I took a step closer, my feet crunching on the dead petals, and that's when I saw them, scattered around the base of the pedestal, more photographs. I knelt down, my knees sinking into the dead flowers, and picked one up. It was Eleanor, the woman from the attic, in this room. She was younger, her smile radiant. She was holding the vase, the strange flower glowing in her hands. I picked up another, a different woman, blonde, same radiant smile, holding the vase. Another, dozens of them, women of all different ages, all different looks, but with the same expression of pure, unadulterated joy on their faces as they held the glowing flower. And then I found the most recent one. It was a Polaroid, the kind that develops instantly. The colors were still sharp. The woman in it had red hair, freckles. She was beautiful. And in her eyes, as she held the vase, was that same terrifying look of longing I'd seen on Eleanor's face in the attic. It was the look of someone who had found the one thing they loved more than life itself. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just cold. It stopped. It froze solid in my veins. Because I recognized her. I had seen her picture on Liam's phone. He'd told me she was an old college friend who had moved away. Her name was Melanie. My mind was a hurricane of horror, but one clear, calm thought floated to the surface. This was his work. This was what he did when he worked late. This was the architecture of his soul. I had to get out. I had to call someone. I had to run. I scrambled to my feet, dropping the photos, and that's when I saw it. The final piece. Leaned against the back of the pedestal, almost hidden in the shadows. It was a small framed drawing, a pencil sketch. It was incredibly detailed, drawn with the hand of a master. It was a portrait of a woman. Her hair was dark, her eyes were closed, a peaceful, serene expression on her face. She was beautiful. She was haunting. It was me. Below the drawing, in Liam's neat handwriting, was today's date and one word: Sarah. The soft click of the door closing behind me was the loudest sound I have ever heard. I spun around. The black door was shut. I ran to it, pushing, shoving, screaming his name. Liam! Liam! It was solid, immovable, a tombstone. I was trapped in his gallery, in his trophy room, surrounded by the ghosts of the women he had loved before me, women who had stood in this very spot, holding that flower, feeling that love, and then, what? Where were they now? The answer was in the petals beneath my feet, in the sweet, cloying smell that filled my lungs with every panicked breath. I slumped against the door, my strength gone. I could feel it now, the warmth of the room, the pulsing light from the flower. It was calling to me, not with a voice, but with a feeling of peace, of belonging.